900 years ago, plus or minus 40 years. And they were carbon dated at separate labs at different times. So there's just no doubt they died together approximately 900 years ago in that mine tunnel, the way the lady told the story. So, when 900 years ago there were no shunts. Now, kids born with it, they can shunt it, and they can live reasonably normal lives. But what it is it's like blowing air up in a balloon. Really, it's uniform. The pressure is uniform. There's no pointing the pressure in any particular direction. So you're not going to get a crease. A moron can see this. I mean, a moron can see this. You're not going to get a crease, and you're going to get splits in the sutures from the pressure. And there are no splits in any of the sutures of the Star Child. Now, experts know this. They know this, and they'll still sit there and argue with me about it because they have to come up with something. And so they'll just rally in behind some stupid idea like this, and they just will not give it up, no matter what. All right, now, here's another point of interest. You see these veins, that's the brain pressing into the bone of the skull. Clearly no water, no fluid on this brain, and you see the Star Child has the same thing. Could have been fluid in the brain, obviously, but not on the brain. And that's the more common one. Okay, so progeria. Now, this is the latest fad among the skeptics and the experts. This is the one you'll read on Wikipedia. I've hammered them so hard on the cradle boarding and hydrocephaly. They've rallied behind this because it's so exotic and so weird. You've probably heard of it. When a kid is born with this, male or female, in the womb they start aging rapidly. And they'll generally die before the age of 10 or 12, like that, because they're aging at a very accelerated rate. So, but still they're human beings. They have human eyes and human eye sockets. They have brow ridges, they have noses, they have ears, they have a neck, a normally placed neck, but a much smaller face. And the heads do look swollen because the face is so down, and the bones do thin out. No question. So it has some of the things that the Star Child has, but it also has the roundness. It doesn't have the creases and do all that stuff. And more importantly, the bones, as they thin out, what happens to the bones of old people? They get brittle. They do thin out, but they get brittle and weak and they break. And that's what happens to these kids. They're very fragile. And so there's the Star Child with its bone 2 or 3 times as hard, and they're still trying to say it's progeria, just because they have to come up with something to explain it. They just can't acknowledge that they've got a real problem explaining this thing. All right, now here we have the front view x-ray. You saw the side view x-ray, and these are the eye sockets, and this is the frontal sinuses of a typical human. This is where they are and what they look like. And you see in the Star Child eye sockets, there's not even a vestige of a frontal sinus. Now, that's extremely unusual. What do you think your sinuses are for? You think they're for something to do with cleaning the air that you breathe, or in some way protecting you from bacteria or germs or something like that? Not true. Not true at all. What your sinuses do is they allow you to talk, to resonate the way I am speaking to you now. It gives your voice resonance. Because if I had no sinuses at all, my voice would sound nothing like this. I would sound more like a robot or something like that, because there would be no resonance. Now, are you seeing a pattern here? Think about it a minute. You've got no resonance to speak. You've got a very small mouth, very small tongue, very small neck, very big brain. What does that suggest? Communication by telepathy. Does it not? It's got everything it needs to communicate telepathically. And yet it's got teeth and it eats because we can see that it did. So that kind of weighs against that, but it's just something to think about. All of that unique set of traits that it has, because everybody says when they're taking, when they interact with grays in any way, it's always they communicate telepathically. Something to think about. All right, this is a CAT scan of the star child's head. And this, while not a human inner ear, this is the size of a human inner ear. And this is the size of the star child's inner ear, twice that size. And the people that have looked at this who know about it, they say, no idea. No idea. Maybe because it has that bigger head on that little bitty neck, because that's a balancing mechanism. Maybe it needs a better balancing mechanism for that. Don't know. But it is unusual. Now, you've all heard the stories, I'm sure, of the women who claim that they are taken on board a UFO, they are made pregnant, they come home, there's no doubt that they're pregnant, they go, they get a sonar scan, they're pregnant, frequently with twins, and in the 4th month, always in the 4th month, they come, they get it, they take the fetus, and the woman wakes up with every sign of a miscarriage except no fetus. She has been harvested. And I don't know how much you know about that, but it goes on in many countries, and it's happening, it goes on in your country. And it happens on a regular basis. Women don't like to talk about it. Men like to talk about it even less. But it happens to men as well because they take sperm from men. They take eggs from women, they make them pregnant. So, a woman named Josie Galante, in Taos, New Mexico, this happened to her in 1990. She was harvested in 1990. And always, always, they will come back and get you when your hybrid child is somewhere between the age of 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, and there are even reports of them getting them at 10 and 12. But generally, it's when they're younger. So she was taken on board in 1995 to see her 5-year-old hybrid son. And she was told to spend time with it, play with it, get to know it, which she did. And she came to believe that it was her child, as they always do. Now understand, these women and these men, when these experiences are over, the aliens do what's called, they put a memory screen or a memory block on them. If you don't know about this, it makes you where you can't remember the experience at all or very clearly. You'll maybe have bad dreams, or you'll have nightmares, or you'll have visions, but you're not sure it actually happened. But all of us are different. And so some people come through that experience with a much clearer vision of it, maybe halfway. They're pretty sure it happened, but they're kind of shady on some of the details. And others come through it with really, really good memories of it, like they didn't even put a screen on, like they might have forgot or something. They can just remember with astonishing clarity every little detail. That happens too. So Josie was one of those people who had a really good memory of it. And so she was an artist, and she drew the son that she saw. And this is the frontal view of him. And this is just showing that these experiences of these women are so common that they are a stereotype now, and it's shown in films. And this little boy was just in a movie. They bulked his head up, and they gave him that scraggly blonde or scraggly dirty looking hair that all the women described, that the kids look bad, and their hair is so thin and unkempt, and it's clear that they're hybrid something. Their eyes are a little different. This kid's, of course, they couldn't do much for his eyes, but you get the idea. I'm not just making this up. It is a common thing that goes on out there, whether you're aware of it or not. Now, this is putting the profile shot, putting the skull up against it. Now, it's pretty remarkable that she did this in 95, and the Star Child didn't come out to public view till 99. Now, the ear is a little higher than it should be, so there's a couple things wrong with it. She's got a brow ridge and nose and all, but still, she got the neck pretty much right, and it just, has a good look to it. Now, another guy contacted me, and he said, in 78, the story about the lawyer? And I said, no, a lawyer had been taken on board, and he had a good memory of it as well. So he paid to have a sculptor work until he got what he believed were the grays that took him. And these eyes are pretty good, because remember we talked about the Star Child that would need, the eyes are going to be down here, they're going to need a pretty big eyelid to cover over, and sure enough, and he's got up until the cheekbones. The cheekbones are too big, but still, this looks about right for what you would be looking for, except the neck is too big, but the ear's in the right place. No crease in the top, but still, there are things wrong in each and some things right, but it's an interesting blend. 95, 78, 99. What are the odds? Now, these are some images that come from various graphic artists who have tried to, or artists who have tried to depict what the Star Child might have looked like, and so I give you a variety and you can take kind of your pick. This is a magazine, excuse me, a magazine cover where the graphic artist took his daughter and just morphed her face. Now, of course, you can see the eye socket and the eye don't match up, but still, it's a pretty interesting technique, and I leave it on there because I think it was a great idea. This is Mark Savy, and you'll see that he did a really interesting way of going about trying to make it all work out right, but he forgot the crease in the top, and he's got a much, much too heavy lower jaw. But still, it's a pretty interesting look when you put you lay the skull kind of underneath it. But now, Rob Roy Menzies does a fusion of the X-ray too, but he took the X-ray and he just built around it. And when he sent me this, I said, God, could you make it look a little less annoyed? So he sent back the final version. After we worked on it, we got this. Now this is, you might recognize the version on the book Communion by Whitley Strieber, the famous book Communion by Whitley Strieber. This is the iconic look of the gray alien. No crease, no, just this is it. Jumped off millions of book covers into the minds of people, and this has become like the image of the gray, except for one thing. This was done by a graphic artist whose assignment was to give me something that'll scare the hell out of people from the book publishers. And so he did. But it actually looks very little like a real gray. Very little. To my surprise, when I heard this story, I was like shocked. But I heard it from Bud Hopkins, the man himself. I mean, Bud is one of the top regressors of people who claim they have these events. He and Dr. David Jacobs are the two leaders in this field. And so what Bud said is they use this as a litmus test with people that claim that they have had experiences with aliens. They know that most people think that that's the way they're supposed to look. So they'll put that image of that in front of them and say, is this what you saw? And if they say, yeah, look just like that, they know pretty quick that this is not somebody to take seriously. But if they put that image and they say, is this what you saw? And if they say, no, that really, they know that's supposed to be what they're supposed to say, but if they've got the courage to sit there and say, no, that isn't what I saw, then they know they're dealing with probably somebody that's telling the truth, because the truth of it is, this is much more. When Bud saw this, he said, oh, well, that's what they're supposed to look like. And this was before I knew that. So anyway, pretty interesting. Now, people always ask, well, have you ever had a forensic model done, a clay model, And finally, the History Channel, one of the television channels in the States, paid the money to have, I don't have the money to do anything, hardly. It's amazing I've gotten done as much as I have, but I certainly didn't ever have the money for that. But they did, to be part of a television show that featured the Star Child. So this is what he came up with, and if you look at the